Sasha's approach to Sacre is so special because it's extremely physical, and she dares to make the dance abstract. So her Sacre is an abstraction.
Dance and the camera grew up together. The Lumiere brothers recorded the first dance in the 1890s. Loie Fuller was an American. She came to Paris in the 1890s. She wasn't a dancer, really. She was just a sort of musical artist who used these amazing, loose-fitting, billowing clothes. And she was one of the first people to use the electric light, ever-changing colour and electric light. She was then filmed later by the Lumiere brothers, and of course the colour they couldn't do, but they painted each frame, so you get some idea of this sort of strange figure moving, floating like butterflies, really. Extraordinary.
Peter Elfelt in Copenhagen did some wonderful films of the Bourne repertoire, and what it tells us is, of course, that the Danes have preserved the choreography correctly and beautifully.
It's wonderful when you can look back on early film of dance, because you can see here is a little bit of Bournonville choreography danced by a ballerina in 1903.
The tragedy is there's nothing taken of the Diaghilev Ballet Russe and far too little of the De Basile Company and the Ballet du Monte Carlo of René Blum. There's no proper record of Alexandra Danilova.
When I saw Tamara Karsavina exercise, it was very interesting because she's doing the exercise, Russian ballet steps, and a lot of things, what she's doing, it was perfect, a lot of things. But if we are looking at the body shape of Tamara Karsavina and the body shapes of the dancers of today, of the 21st century, it looks a bit different. And they can do much more than in the beginning of the 20th century.
The shape of dances has changed enormously over the years. Now it's about being a prime athlete, and I think people are, rightly or wrongly, are chosen now at a very young age based on purely physical aspects. Have they got the right length neck, the sized head, the legs, the feet, the shoulders? Whereas I imagine 50 years ago it would be based on how badly does that child want to dance and what sort of commitment are they showing?
Yeah, I think in fact numbers of young girls applying to be dancers are dropping. Young boys is growing, so it's getting closer to a balance between them, but it's still this kind of constant move towards physical perfection. There's less space there now, I think, for unusual, interesting characters to get ahead in dance.
Mary Wigman was born in Germany in 1886. She was a dancer, a teacher, and a choreographer. And in those early days, everybody just gave solo recitals, as Isadora did, as so many of them just gave solo recitals of their work. But she was a big influence on modern dance in Germany. During the Nazi time, she was teaching privately, and then after the war came back to open a school which became very, very influential on the young German choreographers at that time.
Meine einzige Tanzerziehung habe ich durch sie erhalten. Und alles, was ich jetzt weiß und alles, was ich tue, geht auf ihren Ureinfluss zurück. Und den kann man auch nicht verlieren. Dass ich abgezweigt bin in die Musical Comedy, ist kein Rückschritt, sondern ich würde sagen, ein Fortschritt in einer anderen Bahn. Es ist nicht dasselbe, was auf der Bühne als solches steht, als reinen Tanz oder angewandten Tanz. Denn was in den Musical Comedies passiert ist genauso gut der Wert des Tänzers.
I think the greatest influence of Broadway and of Hollywood and of American television is that it gave employment to the dancers. Think of all the dancers that you see in Busby Berkeley movies.
In Hollywood, the sensation of the moment is the picture called 42nd Street, into which Warner Brothers have put stars, girls, beauty, and talent in lavish quantities.
And it gave the rest of the world a chance to see some extraordinary show dancing, which was very different from what we were used to in Europe, which was sort of ballet, and also the very beginnings of contemporary dance. It was a freedom. It gave us an amazing sense of excitement, a new way of moving, which I think changed dance around the world.
The first moving images of dance I can remember have to be on the television, watching Fred Astaire when I was very young. In the afternoons, my parents would sit me in front of them and go, "Look at that, it's great dancing, look at that." My parents were big fans of dance.
I didn't really discover contemporary dance or ballet until my late teens. So what I knew of dance was filmed dance, and was mainly Fred Astaire has always been my idol.
I don't know, is it a lot to do with the dancers? Is it a lot to do with the black and white? Maybe the simplicity of black and white simply gives you more dramatic, maybe more stressed, more focused. It's the biggest contrast there is, white and black, and maybe at some point we will see that it's not totally gone.
Thank heaven that the Russians preserved the work of Madame Ulanova and Madame Plisetskaya. They should now be filming some of their great dancers of today. I suppose video and people's ability to film things on their telephones and put them on the internet is one answer. But I do believe that a serious director needs to be there to make sure that everything works properly. Amateur film is one thing, but professional film is a much more serious and worthwhile thing.
We can educate the dancers when we show them there's some old videos, film, and some videos of the great dancers of the ballet history. This can help a lot, and I don't understand how it possible works now without the video, without the film, without the recording.
Red Shoes, I really do think, was the most influential film of dancing there has ever been. It quite simply, it was a ludicrous story. This nonsensical company, the Lermontov Ballet, and all that stumbling around and all that idiot nonsense that is associated with it. What it did, it conveyed the huge excitement that there is in going to ballet. It also glamorized ballet in a curious way. It encapsulated some perfectly terrible performances, but that didn't matter. There is a clip of Leonid Miasin, which is worth the rest of the film put together. Maurice was very beautiful, and she danced admirably well. And everyone suddenly thought, oh gosh, ballet. I know for a fact that certain young dancers were put onto the career of dancing by seeing the red shoes.
In those days, choreographers mostly were not dancers. They were idea men with the camera. They would move the camera around rather than dancers. They would have top shots, or they made the camera dance rather than the people. Fred and I used to have a way of creating a number. We just, so from music and props and ideas. And sometimes he would call me in the middle of the night and say, well, what do you think this? And I say, well, okay. And I'll call him and tell him something. One time, I called him one night, I remember. I said, I've got an idea. I said, he said, it better be good. You know, he was always kidding. And I said, to dance with a hat rack instead of a girl. He said, what? I said, well, let me explain to you when I see you. And I said, if the bottom of the hat rack is round, so it can, and weighted, and would come back and fall down, and you can dance with it and roll it around you and jump over it and think, and he said, that's great.
I don't think you can beat the way Fred Astaire approached film, in that we saw the whole body move most of the time, virtually all of the time. We saw long edits, so our dance only has 1 or 2 edits within it. And what we get from that, I think, is you experience the dance in a very real way, because you can see that it's actually happening rather than being edited and cleverly worked out so that you're being fooled into seeing something, maybe, rather than something that is actually happening.
One of the greatest moments, I think, filmed of ballet is of Madame Ulanova and Madame Plisetskaya in The Fountains of Bakhchisarai, which is a wonderful ballet. The scene in which Ulanova, as the innocent and captured heroine, is attacked and indeed killed by Zarema, who is the mistress of the Khan who has captured Ulanova. Uladova had that rarest of gifts of stillness. She could be still and tell you great truths.
Rudolf was hungry. He was a hungry young man in his 20s, and he wanted to go somewhere. He was excited by what he'd seen and what he'd heard about in the West, and then he just set out with determination to try and be the most exciting male dancer in the Western world. Rudolf made an enormous impression on male dancing in the United Kingdom.
I think over the last, I guess it would be 50 years, the status of male dancer has changed beyond recognition. You know, he was originally someone who stood behind the ballerina, didn't do very much.
Didn't have to do very much, but since then, obviously, there have been great celebrity male dancers who have changed our lives.
Rudolf Nureyev and Margot Fonteyn was the great dance partnership of the second half of the 20th century. It changed dance forever, in this country, in Europe, and in America. She was in her 40s, coming to the end of her career. She was president of the Royal Academy of Dancing. She'd heard about him when he defected from the Soviets in Paris and invited him to perform with her at a gala. And then the partnership was made, and the rest is history. Flemming Fint was a Danish-trained dancer who was performing with companies all over Europe, here in London with what was then London Festival Ballet, and I think with Paris Opera Ballet at a time. And he was invited by Danish television in 1963 to make a ballet specifically for television. And as he was living in Paris, he went to UNESCO and said, "Could I make a ballet version of your play, The Lesson?" The play, is all about a mathematician and a maths lesson, but he transposed it into a ballet class. He played the ballet master, the girl was his pupil, and the other third person was, I don't think she really dances at all, but she is the pianist in the class. And in the end, he becomes so infatuated with the girl that he murders her. It was tremendous. It made an impression on me, and I think anyone who saw it. And then it was transferred to the stage the following year and has been in the repertoire of companies all over the world. Birgit Kullberg and her work was an example of what was happening in the 60s, 70s, 80s in all the public broadcasting systems of Europe. Their television directors were working with choreographers making new work specifically for the television. And she was absolutely interested in, from the very beginning, in what the camera could do. When the world of blue screen happened, when you could change the background, I mean, we see it all the time in movies now, but this was the very beginning. It seems very primitive, but I can assure you, when it first screened, it was very, very exciting.
Spartacus was the ballet which brought Mr. Grigorovich to world fame because it was a magnificent achievement. It was a score which several choreographers had tried to do beforehand. I've seen the other versions. They're nowhere near as good. Here was something massive, politically very resonant about what the Soviet Union and its ambitions would like at that time. But it also enshrined this prodigious performance by Vladimir Vasilyev.
Etude is another work by a Danish choreographer, Harold Lander, which has gone down in the repertoire of many, many companies. It is a magnificent piece. It starts with the basic exercises at bar and goes on to end in a most marvellous pas de deux, and a great expression and explosion of dance. Merce Cunningham created a revolution in dance. He moved the idea of music and the movement, the dance, separated them completely. So when you rehearsed a piece, he rehearsed the movement, and the musician and the orchestra rehearsed their bit of music, and the two things came together the first time on the first night. That caused a revolution. He Also was just interested in dance. Dance is about dance itself. It doesn't tell stories, it is just about movement. And it is the movement that he taught his company for, nearly over 50 years, I think, in America. And then the tours that the company took all over the world influenced so much young dancers and young choreographers today.
I have no recollection as to when dancing first captivated me. As far back as I can remember, I have always had an appetite for movement.
Dance in America was, without question, the most important dance series. It was made by PBS, WNET, the New York affiliate of PBS, and brought to the screen the work of American companies and American choreographers. Merce Cunningham, Martha Graham, Paul Taylor, and of course Alvin Ailey. Dance for the camera, video dance, dance for the screen, all names that have used for it, but what it is dance specially created for the video camera and not for the stage.
The idea of inventing something from scratch, collaborating with a choreographer, and designing the movement to work cinematically rather than on the stage. That, for me, is dance on camera.
Outside In was one of the films that the BBC and Arts Council commissioned from the American choreographer Victoria Marks and director Margaret Williams. They suddenly hit upon the idea of making a piece with the Canduco Company, which is a British dance company for able and disabled people. It won many awards, I'm very pleased to say, but what it mainly did was suddenly realize that you could be a dancer in a wheelchair. La 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 Human Steps were, I suppose, one of the first Canadian companies to break into Europe and break into the world. Extraordinary, doing exactly what you're not supposed to do on point and in ballet. It caused a sensation, still is causing a sensation. Some people like it, some people don't, but it's very, very exciting dance.
When I've done adaptations of my own work for camera, of existing theatre work, I think I'm telling people the story that I think I'm looking at on stage. It's probably not what they're always looking at. There's a certain amount of control you have. The pas de quatre of the Swans, we call it the signet dance in my company.
Enter Achilles is really about being a man, being male. It's a group of men just investigating themselves, finding out more about themselves as a group and as individuals. The BBC film that we made came at the end of, I suppose it was nearly 2 years of world touring of the piece. So it was all inside not only Lloyd, but also the director and also the dancers. So it could be then compressed down to 90 minutes. The stage version had a stage set. For the television version, it was put into an old pub on the Harrow Road in North London, which is long since demolished, and that just suited the piece absolutely and made it a piece of powerful television.
I gotta go away and leave you for a couple of days. But I said I don't want no more rocket tricks. I'm gonna get some concrete mix and fill your back with rubber bricks, and you better be there with me when I get my business fixed.
Alley of the Cosmonauts was the title of Sasha Waltz's play in 1998. That is a street name in Berlin, in former East Berlin. She did a social research And this is rare for a choreographer to go out into the suburbs of a city and to visit families and to see apartments and carpets and sofas and images on the wall, which maybe Sasha Waltz has never seen before. And she transferred this into a fictive family.
If we were to compare the experience of sitting in a theater, watching a large stage, smaller stage, we're aware of the stage and the atmosphere that we're sitting in, and we experience this particular work within that framework. If we are watching a film, we're watching a TV, the screens do get bigger, but they're never quite as big as the actual stage, so we're watching something in a smaller dimension. And I think we have to find ways to transport the human feeling, because I believe dance is the most human art, because the human body is both subject and instrument of dance.
Clougate dancers have received trainings of the traditional Chinese body disciplines, namely meditation, martial art, and Tai Chi Daoyin, which is an ancient form of Qigong. All these training share the principle of aesthetics of choreography. The dancers also took choreography class weekly. We didn't mean to prepare them for a career of a choreography master. Rather, with practice with brushes, they acquired a much stronger ability to decipher the energy in those masterpieces.
I think that the styles are merging together. We're not so clear-cut between Broadway choreography, classical ballet, contemporary dance, modern dance, other styles of dance. It feels like we're using a lot of, we're blending a lot of these styles together. A lot of contemporary ballet it owes as much to contemporary dance as it does to classical ballet, and vice versa.
Dance for camera is about creating dance for the screen, and for the screen only. It might not work in a theatrical space.
What's very exciting about it is it really has to be a collaboration. A choreographer can't do that on his own, and a filmmaker can't do that on his own. You have to have them both working together to understand each other's medium and to find the best way of exploiting it.
Membros, the dancing group from Brazilian coastal town Macaé, comes from the favela. The young choreographer Vieira was able to found a cultural center in the favela to get the young people off the streets. So Membros is a young dancing group, very eccentric, very beautiful movements, mesmerizing bodies, but really coming out of violence, coming out of the street.
And often it has a strongly political element in the sense that it's, if you want to use that horrible word, the underclass showing the rest of us what they can do and do very successfully.
Pensar mil vezes antes de tirar a vida de alguém. Do outro lado eu já vi acontecer. Caso de ter que matar pra não morrer. Eu peço a Deus pra me orientar e não deixar nenhum cuzão me estranhar, seja quem.
Akram Khan and Sidi Labid Cherkaoui are both coming from migratory backgrounds. Sidi from a Flemish Moroccan family and Akram from a Bengali background. Both were raised in Western Europe, and you feel that they have recurrent themes, that is spirituality, religion, being a foreigner in the world, or seeing the differences. And it's so rare that two wonderful choreographers do dance on stage, just together, as we see it in 0 Degrees.
If you work with an expert cameraman and an expert director, you can, in fact, transport perhaps not the same experience, but a different experience, which also perhaps can give an audience something which they cannot have watching the ballet in a theater in 3 dimensions, as we would say.
Tectonic from Paris is electro. Their dance is street, is electro, and they call themselves Tectonic due to the music style Tectonic. So their movements are so elaborate, but everything from the forms of contemporary street dance. It's again hip-hop, it's jump, and it's electro. And they are very, very fond of pop and huge disco hits, but they are changing them into heavy rhythms, and so they perform often on the street, and they are really audience appealing because they are mixing popular movements and popular music.
Being a neighbor to a musician can be a nightmare, but I was lucky. He was a good musician, so so I never had to complain about his rehearsals.
I found it very fascinating that the storyline and how this would work with the two apartments and the music going from one to the other and it affecting the couple on the other side.
When you're in a theatre, you can choose what you watch, who you watch. It could be the girl standing in the corner doing next to nothing. It could be the guy doing a solo. It could be your eye has that choice. But obviously, when you're making dance films, you're making that choice for the audience. And that can sometimes be tricky. Do you just want to show them the choreography? Do you keep that camera wide? Do you just show it for its glory? Or do you want to show some more intimacy? Do you want to see what you can't see in a theatre?
Alain Platel's piece Pitié means compassion. And our film Passion, Last Stop Kinshasa, was catching the dancers on stage. That was an extraordinary production condition which we had to film with 3 cameras on stage, so the dancers were really, really physical. And that is Alain Platel's approach. His motto was, "You are the flesh of my flesh."
Wim Wenders' Pina was one of the best dance films I've seen. You recommended I go and see it. I'm not a great fan of going to see dance films. believe it or not, even though we make a lot. You know, if someone highly recommends it, I'll go and see it. But I think the 3D in that worked. It gave it something.
Yeah, I think it went some way to replacing the element that's lost when you're filming something live. You're inevitably losing something from that performance, and the 3D for me really began to go somewhere towards replacing that.
Comme Pina n'était pas prévue et qu'elle l'a fait parce qu'elle tu t'en rappelais jamais qu'elle le montrait, on lui a dit ah voilà.
I love the fact that even the performances that were staged, the Rite of Spring, for instance, in that film, the cameras were on stage quite a lot of the time, which I really liked. It wasn't, you weren't sat back and watching it.
Je pense que le cinéma a apporté encore une autre dimension, à tous les points de vue. Une dimension par rapport à la taille, par rapport à l'écran, par rapport au fait que l'on voit ensemble, que le public voit ensemble un spectacle. Et je suis, pour ma part, je ne suis pas la seule, toujours assez touchée de voir, lors d'un spectacle, les personnes applaudir. Vraiment, on a la sensation que ces personnes vivent pleinement le spectacle, presque comme quand ils sont directement dans la salle pour un spectacle en direct.
I, together with the director, direct the eye of the observer and tell him what he really should see while watching this ballet. And I think this is a legitimate way of producing a new work of art.
The use of cameras and video now in the studio is absolutely crucial. Everyone uses it, and I think everyone's being trained to use it now, which is more important. We use it every day, especially near the end of the week when the dancers feel they're reaching the point where the piece is perfected. We'll film it. They'll soon see their faults a lot quicker than we can. And it's a shortcut.
Yeah, when we were young dancers, all you had was a mirror and someone telling you what you're doing wrong, and there's really no substitute for seeing it yourself. You know, if you're just relying on the mirror, you miss a great deal and your eye is very selective. But with video, there's no hiding. There's nowhere to take refuge. You're just shown your flaws.
Not a lot of dancers like it either. They don't like watching themselves on television, but unfortunately it's part of the profession nowadays.